everyone. I just saw an email indicating that there are a few of our members that are not going to make it tonight. So thank you for being here. We are going to get going. And again, welcome to tonight's Oversight Committee of the Northeast Housing Strategies. I'm Dr. Stephen Holt, and I'm the chair of the committee. And if you have not picked up a packet, there's a packet of information where you are to sign in. A couple of things. If you are new to the meeting, would like to capture your email address so that we can keep you abreast of what's going on and put you on a mailing list, and you can then stay connected to what's happening in relationship to North and Northeast housing strategies. And there's much work that is going on. We're going to talk about some of it tonight. Secondly, if you are here and you want to have a moment for, as you look at the agenda, there's a section for public comment. If you're here and you would like to talk, there's a card for you to sign in at and put some information down. And when we get to that moment, then we can call on you, and you'll have about 3 minutes to share your public comment. Now, I request that your comment be as it relates to what's on the agenda tonight. So what we're talking about, that way we can engage in a manner that is useful and beneficial. Now, if you have questions that are not in regard to what's on the agenda tonight, and there are concerns about North and Northeast housing activities and strategies and actions that are going on, we welcome those as well. It's important that we're hearing from you and staying connected to you. One of the ways to do that or to engage is to talk to people who work for the Portland Housing Bureau. And so every Portland Housing Bureau staff member, if you would identify yourself by raising your hand. So if you look around the room, there are some that are behind you also. You can grab them. Oh, well, I shouldn't say grab them. Let's, in today's world, that isn't the appropriate terminology. So let me roll that back. You can approach them kindly and begin to engage. You can get their business card and or information, and they will interact with you regarding what your questions are. And if they can't answer them tonight, we are consistent and committed to following up so that we stay accountable and engaged. So thanks again for being here tonight, and I look forward to what we have on the docket. We're going to begin. Item number 1 is Portland Housing Bureau updates, and Shannon Callahan, who is the acting director of the Portland Housing Bureau, Dana Ingram, will join her. The NHP manager will let you tell us what that means. And a PHC representative.
Good evening, Dr. Holt and members of the committee. Shannon Callahan of the Portland Housing Bureau. Before we bring up PHC, I would like to introduce Dana Ingram, the new neighborhood programs team manager for the Portland Housing Bureau. Dana has just recently assumed that role, I think 3 weeks, maybe? Only one and a half. But as you know, Dana's been working for the Bureau for quite some time, and we are very excited that she has accepted this new role. And she will be giving a presentation on an update regarding home ownership in a little bit. But I was going to give you a few updates about a couple of other items relating to the city and or your work. So I will be talking a little bit about the budget for the next year, an update on down payment assistance, loans, Argyle, and then we'll move to Dana and PHC's presentation. So we are in the process of beginning budget kickoff for the city of Portland. I have before you on the slide deck a simple explanation of the next few months of regarding the direction for putting together the entire city's budget. We officially begin that process in November. In December, we have a more precise idea of the resources that are available to the city through its general fund. And officially in January, we submit our budget and budget packages, which then result in the beginning phase of the budget analysis and budget decisions by City Council. The reason I'm bringing this item to you today in advance of beginning our budget process is over the last few months in working with you, I have heard this committee make reference to wanting to talk about budget issues regarding North and Northeast outside of the urban renewal area funds that you provide oversight and guidance for the Housing Bureau on. I can tell you that it does not appear by early indications from our budget office that this will be a robust year for adding new city funds to any particular bureau or area. But there could be a likelihood of small additional one-time pots. One-time for us is differentiated from funds that would be an ongoing source of program funding. We also do have significant resources at our disposal presently in terms of federal allocation of CDBG, et cetera. And so we would be wanting to talk with you about ideas that you have had or expressed as a committee before as we start to put together our budget package. So a little preview of that. We can talk more at any particular meeting that you have upcoming, just to give you an idea of maybe some things that you want to start thinking about before the Housing Bureau actually submits a budget. Officially, we have a budget advisory committee, which is our Portland Housing Advisory Commission, but I'm going to be reaching out to all of our advisory commissions with the same message to be thinking about the Housing Bureau's budget going forward. Also in your packet, as we began, I believe, 3 months ago, this is the second quarterly update. This is the format that we all talked about. And you can see where we are in terms of rental development, home repair loans, home repair grants, and then in terms of our progress on home ownership. Dana and PHC will be talking in more detail about home ownership and where we are and that process up next. Did anybody have a question before I move on?
I don't at the moment.
Thank you. So the other item I wanted to bring to your attention is this committee made reference to the structure of our down payment assistance loan in your annual report to council earlier this year, concluding the 2017 annual report. PHB heard your advice and guidance, and as I believe we brought to you 2 months ago at your last session, a new format for down payment assistance loans for home ownership, which would begin forgiveness at year 15 with 3% each year until, if a homeowner has remained in their home after 30 years, the loan would be completely forgiven. My recollection is that you supported this format and this proposal, and I wanted to let you know that we're bringing that for official adoption by City Council next Wednesday, the 19th. Oh, Dana. Carl Dinkelspiel is also on your agenda later with project updates. But I wanted to make sure, I believe I had sent you all an email regarding this, but you had at your last meeting indicated support for funding an additional $5.ish million for the REACH proposal, the Argyle, to move forward. And listening to what you had said and also doing a deep dive into the REACH and Argyle project's finances as proposed, we recommended filling that gap, and Mayor Wheeler supported that recommendation. REACH has also agreed to commit to, if additional funds are needed as they move to the construction phase to complete the project, that they will not be requesting any additional funds from the Portland Housing Bureau to move that project forward. That was an important commitment on our part as we're reaching the end of the funds we have remaining in the district presently. And now I would like to turn it over to our Neighborhood Housing Partnership Manager, Ms. Dana Ingram, and PHC. Oh, did you? I apologize. I forgot to introduce something with PHC. And I realize that we haven't updated you on this before, but PHC is now working with the Portland Housing Bureau on the house preference policy households under our home ownership program. They will be the point of contact for any new households that we bring on for home ownership opportunities, and they will also be working with the down payment assistance loans that we've added, the 10 citywide down payment assistance loans that we mentioned to you some time ago, and also households that had previously been working with the Collaborative in terms of counseling have moved over to the Portland Housing Center. So with that, I will turn it over to Dana and PHC unless anyone has any questions about that.
Thank you, Shannon. Again, I'm Dana Ingram. Like Shannon said, I'm new to this role, but I have been working very closely with the policy team and the North-Northeast strategy as it relates to home ownership, with close work with our partners, our community partners. Just a quick update, because I don't think it's included in the presentation that you'll receive from Jackie at PHC, is around, I believe, July is the at the time that we transferred or referred people that had been working with other partners over to Portland Housing Center. And Portland Housing Center hosted what's called a briefing or info session, and that was about 12 to 14 folks. And then just last night, we also, they hosted another briefing. We did invite 30 people off of the wait list to start working with a housing counselor. I believe there were about 12 or 14 people that attended that one. And so we'll continue to do that on a monthly basis, just trying to reach additional people on the wait list to start getting them ready for home ownership. So with that said, I will go ahead and pass this over to Jackie.
Okay. All right, so I am just testing. Okay, it's way too loud. So I'm just going to give you a presentation and give you some information on the clients that we are currently working with on the preference policy. Am I going the wrong way? Okay, perfect. So I don't think this has, oh, it does have a point, okay. So just to give you some demographics, as you can see by this slide, the majority, which is about 86% of households, are Black, African American, alone or with another race, and 77% are non-Hispanic. Here you can see the most common type of household is a single female head of household or single female household, and that gives us about 68% of the total households that we have. The median age of clients, head of household, is 37 and a half years old. Approximately 46% of the clients are under the age of 35, with the youngest being 25 and the oldest being 75 years old. Am I going the right way? No. Okay, so in terms of income range, approximately 14% of households have an income under $30,000, which puts them under the guidelines for all options, including Habitat for Humanity. The slots have been rescinded or referred to the second round if they showed that they have an opportunity to increase their income over time. The individual here making over 120% MFI was rescinded due to program income guidelines. So this shows that 59% of households make under 80% of MFI, which qualifies them for North-Northeast resources. The majority of clients currently live in the inner Northeast or North Portland, which 68% of them call homes in one of these neighborhoods. Other popular areas of residence includes outer North or Southeast, which is 14%, Northwest 9%, and outside the city of Portland for 9%. Right now, this shows that 100% of preference policy households are currently renting. Of these households, the median rent payment is $1,000 and, am I going backwards? Okay, $1,021. 58% are paying more than $1,000 a month, and 27% are housing cost burdened according to the HUD definition. This just shows a list of the status of the clients that we have met with thus far. And so you can see that 2 of the household qualified or were interested in Habitat, and we referred them over. 3 were transferred for the wait list. 2 were rescinded. We have 1 that's been pre-approved, and 13 slots we are working on them to get them towards mortgage readiness. And we have 1 at that point, a pending appointment for assessment. Okay. Currently, generally speaking, the preference policy clients have lower credit scores and higher debt-to-income ratios, which presents a barrier to becoming mortgage ready. 60% have a credit score under 640 or no score, which will again affect their ability to qualify for a mortgage. 51% have a debt-to-income over 10%, which will again cut into their maximum mortgage affordability. With savings, 50% of the clients have less than $1,000 in savings. In terms of general mortgage readiness, of the clients that we assessed, 77% are long-term clients with 1 or more barriers to home ownership, with credit and debt to income being the most common barriers. These are clients we, of course, will continue to work with them to get them mortgage ready, and we will continue to pull credit systematically to look for any progress or upgrades. With the lack of savings, our affordability assessment, we utilize the assumption of the Oregon Bond Cash Advantage scenario, and we estimated a 43% ratio. 33%, which means 33% of their monthly gross income should go towards housing, and then their total debt to income should be no more than 43%. And so with that, we were able to determine their maximum purchase price. Of the 4 households here that are in the highest range, only 1 had a score of 640 or higher, and that person still had credit issues, and the others had scored, the average score was 570. So the next steps for us is we're just going to continue to work with the clients to get them mortgage ready. We are continuing to hold orientations. We are not holding one in October, but we will be holding 2 in November so we could offer more options and try to get more people in. And then we'll just follow the process of assessing them and putting them on track for mortgage readiness. So these are the clients that we've worked with. And so of the clients that came yesterday, we did have 7 clients have signed up for appointments. 2 are pending appointments because we need some additional paperwork, and 2 we're rescinding. So that's just an update on the clients that we are currently working with. And I'll take any questions.
Any questions from the Oversight Committee?
I feel like maybe I missed a plot point here, which was just as Director Callahan was stepping away, saying, collaborative counseling clients are now at PHC. So is that these numbers of people, or what does that mean exactly? I thought everyone was coming through. I'm a little confused about who are these numbers representing versus that comment that counseling clients from R are now working at PHC.
Do you want to take it, Dana?
Yeah, I can provide some numbers. So as this transition was happening, there were about 11 households that hadn't met with anyone yet. We had invited to a briefing session and they hadn't met anyone. Then this transition happened. Those 11 folks went over to Portland Housing Center after not having been assigned to any organization yet. Then as the transition was firmed up, there were, I don't know exactly how many, but I believe there were 18 households that were working with ended up, the collaborative continued to work with several people that were mortgage ready or very much interested in some of the units that were being constructed. And so there was an attrition. There's some people that actually kind of opted themselves out or found that this was not going to work for them. So it's a combination. It was an 11 that was referred to them that hadn't met with anyone, and then less than 18 was referred from and then there was an additional, again, 30 people invited, but only about 10 or 12 that showed up last night. So yes, the answer is most of them are the folks that the collaborative were working with. It's a combination. And I don't know the exact numbers. But
So, Dr. Bates, did that answer your question, or did you have a specific question? Because we are working towards single list management through assessments with the Portland Housing Center, and during those discussions, the decision to transition households over to PHC directly for counseling services, still working with the collaborative partners on home ownership opportunities for the units that were being developed with the collaborative, which are Proud Ground and Habitat for Humanity homes. We have not yet reached resolution with the other homeownership partner that was working with us, which is PCRI. So did that answer your question?
So the Collaborative, which is Proud Ground and Habitat, is no longer going to be doing any counseling, assessment or counseling.
Not right now, no. They are not doing that. It was a larger group than that included other counseling providers, including Hacienda and other partners as well. But the counseling services have been transferred over to PHC, yes.
So, any other question from the Oversight Committee at the moment? Talk to me a little bit about the strategy for the families that you made mention about, those who are 30% or below, that show, I can't remember exactly how you articulated it, but show the possibility of being able to earn or increase their earnings from there. What's the strategy with that?
We will be working with those clients. Let me just go back to my notes. Let me just make sure.
As you're looking at those notes, Jackie, maybe this is my other question. These figures represent about 30 people, under 30 people. These were about 22 people. Okay, 22 people, and then there's an additional 10-ish that we're engaged with in this week. Yes. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So yes, this list represents 22. Yesterday, when we had our orientation, we signed up we scheduled appointments with another 7, and then 2 more appointments are pending once we get some additional paperwork, and 2 people will be rescinded from the group that came. They will be taken off of the list.
They're not eligible.
Correct.
Okay.
either not eligible or decided to leave, or it wasn't for them, that opportunity wasn't for them. So no decision necessarily was made on Portland Housing Centers. At that briefing, they decided it was not for them and left.
And I'll give a little context for my question around the 30%. Part of the challenge we've had coming to this work is in the initial rollout, there was an absence of an economic standard. So that was not communicated to those who responded. And so I've got twofold concern. One concern I have is just the frustration with families who got engaged and got involved with the process without being given a financial kind of barrier that says you need to be here if you're going to be able to benefit from the program. And so to get in and then find out that you need to be where you aren't, the frustration associated with that. So I've got significant concern with how we're handling that. But then secondly, for those who are who find that out, if there's any process, what's kind of going on? How are we navigating those waters? So that's where my question is coming from.
So as we assess the clients, we are working with them to get them mortgage ready. The clients who are below income, if they did not present that their income could increase so that the home was affordable, they could take advantage of the down payment, then those clients would be rescinded. Clients who are below that income, but they show that they will be or expect to increase their income for affordability, then we're continuing to work with those clients. So we are working with the majority of clients to get them ready. And we're working on the issues of credit score, debt, and down payment. The one thing we don't have control of is income, and that's what they'll need to qualify.
No accusation in the
Right.
question.
Oh,
right?
no, none
Just
taken.
trying to get some clarity
Right.
around what, if anything, we can do to, or how we help, how can we acclimate, what can we do to provide services for these families?
Right.
Again, the context moved into this program with no economic qualifier, and then find out later that's just a significant issue.
Well, we're not taking out the option that they do have for Habitat. So that is an option for that client, and they have to choose that option. But we do lay that out for them. So we're not just simply saying, no, you don't qualify. Here are your options.
Do we know at this moment how many families fall below? Do you have an idea?
I can get you that number. I don't have the exact number.
Okay, thank you. I would appreciate that.
Sure. Might be on here, but.
Dr. Holta, just to give you a little bit, as Jackie mentioned, we're trying to move folks to the next round of homeownership opportunities that were not in this original 65, including new homes that are being developed by Proud Ground and Habitat in the next round of homeownership, so that folks that don't show that they'll be ready in the timeline that we've been currently working with you on, which is the end of 2019, we're trying to move them and keep an option for them if there is a clear path under the next round of homeownership. And one of the other things that PHC has done that was not done prior was talking about being more specific about which options were available and where folks' incomes would actually qualify for those homes, because clearly some folks are not going to be successful with very low incomes trying to take a down payment assistance loan in the open market. And so those are some of the things that the working with the Portland Housing Bureau, the Portland Housing Center has been doing. So just to give you a little bit more of a full picture, one of our, we're aware of what that not making income decisions, those were decisions that we did make in the community process, but we have realized that we would like to go in a different direction, and so we are trying to make sure that people are matched up better in the slots that are potentially available, so we don't have people working for a long period of time.
Thank you. That's what I was wanting to make sure I was hearing, is that people are actually being directed to what's realistic based on where they are, as opposed to just being tossed general information. I'll pause on that for a moment. You have a question?
Yeah, so some of this group of people were already anticipating working with Habitat, or that was the path that they were on, right? And some people are being now informed that that's their only path given their income.
Well, as we do the assessment, we lay out the different paths that they have. So we have 2 people that were referred to Habitat, and as we continue to do the assessment, we will then give them Habitat as an option if that falls for them.
But some people came out of the collaborative that was with Habitat, right?
Well, I'm only talking about the people that we are serving, so I'm not, so these are just the people that we are working with right now. This is where they are. And of those people, 2 are going to go to Habitat.
There may be, so there were an additional 4 people that remained with the collaborative that Habitat identified and had approved them already. So Habitat is continuing to work with them. Habitat will continue to work with the households that Portland Housing Center identifies as being, that being one of the options, and they actually choose and decide that that is the direction they want to go.
Okay. I think what I'm losing in the big picture, I mean, we've been talking about this for a while, a long time. And this set of data is really helpful in understanding a lot of things. I think what I'm having a hard time grasping is the match or mismatch of the possible pathways of folks into program slots given their realities. So, for example, like Habitat will be able to serve X number of people, and are they like at capacity given the set of people? Are they over? Like, is the balance of program slots not align with the folks' income?
Well, we've met
status?
with Habitat and Proud Ground, so we've worked out a process by which we'll refer clients to them based upon their assessment. And so I don't think either of them are at capacity. They are anxiously awaiting our assessments and identifying people to send over to them. So there is no lack of capacity, if that's the question that you're asking.
They have program slots and they have units to put people in.
Right.
And they're just waiting for humans.
Right.
They have actual, like someone can open the door to their house tomorrow if they were ready.
That's being built.
No,
building,
they can't.
it is being built. And so there's still time for clients to get ready and work with Habitat if that's one of their choices.
And
and
what
so-
about Proud Ground?
The same thing, it is being built.
Okay.
There are 2 sites, Olin and Kilpatrick, with a total of, I believe, 24 units. If I'm wrong, someone can correct me. And so right now,
And that's because I mean, Proud Ground mostly doesn't build stuff, right? They're mostly helping people buy with down payment assistance. So is that
Land trust.
right? The only option that this set of people have is to move into newly built Proud Ground houses because of their income versus the price of housing.
So Dr. Bakes, I'll just answer the question about development. These guys can answer the income questions. There's a site at 5020 North
Right,
Interstate, right, that
Yeah.
Proud Ground's developing. We expect it to be in construction in 2019. That's 51 total units and 40 that would be affordable. And then 2 separate sites that Habitat's developing that should be in development later this year, which would be 12 plus 30, so 42, I believe, altogether. So those are the units some of the units that would be available for those clients.
Yeah, I remember that part. Okay. I just mean that the other model of Proud Ground is you get a down payment assistance and you go out and go buy a house. That's mostly what they've been doing. Yeah, and the house goes into land trust. Like that's mostly what they've been doing. So that's not available for people for practical reasons, right?
that could be available for folks. There is still, I don't know if that home ended up being sold. The Proud Ground did have a unit that they had available and were made available for preference policy families. And however, there was a time where they weren't able to sell it or identify a preference policy. We all weren't able to identify a preference policy family. It was a 2-bedroom, and so we had trouble selling that. I don't know what the status of that sale is right now, but you're right, that is Proud Grounds, how they have been doing business.
Right.
Yes.
I guess I'm just wondering, like, is this an infinity program now? I mean, there is supposed to be a time limit on it, but are we actually saying there's not going to really be a time limit on it and do this until forever because that's how long it's going to take? I'm not trying to be smart about it. I think it would be good to keep working with people until they can get into a home. So I'm just trying to like see where does all this get us?
So I think, Dr. Bates, our feeling is that we took in a number of families via the first round of the preference policy, kind of the original, but the original 65. And the people that have been working on this list, the original 65 for lack of a better term, we've been trying to do as right by those folks as we can, based on the fact that we didn't income qualify them, that we didn't know whether we're ready for homeownership opportunities, that we didn't necessarily have new development options for them that they could afford. And so one of our first priorities as the Bureau is trying to make sure that we are as true to our work with those original families as we can be. And so making sure that even though the opportunity for them may or may not be before 2019, that we can slot them into the new developments that we are creating under the strategy that'll come online later, whether that be 5020 North Interstate. So we're trying not to pass them by if we can, based on decisions that were made about income qualification. At the same time, we're trying to reach our original goal to get homeowners with the original 65 by what was originally 2018, and after discussions with you, I believe before I even came to the Bureau, was moved to 2019. And so in working with PHC, who has a portion of those clients, a large portion of those clients, we are seeing where we can get to reach that goal toward 2019. This is a new relationship with PHC with a lot of new data and a new direction from the Housing Bureau. Also, I will say, a new manager of the neighborhood housing program team. I'm not prepared to say to you today that we won't be able to reach that 65 by 2019, but based on our numbers right now, I don't think anyone could say that there aren't doubts and questions in our mind. We will be working over the next coming months to do the analysis now that we have the better data to see and give you better true targets. You may not like our response to that, you may. But our first priority right now is making sure that we can be as true to what we said we were going to do with those households that we first brought on. So I don't know if that gives you the full picture of what we're attempting to do, but we're trying to put and get people into the options, give them the options with clarity about what they really can afford, what kind of path they can be on to try to get as many folks into home ownership as we can. And I think we will, this is our first look at a deep dive into some of these households and what their barriers are. We've known some of this, but not at this level. And so I think we'll all be working together. And I look at Dana to say she's only been here a month and a half as our new manager, but it's already a task that she and Carl Dinkelspiel and the whole NHP team are digging into with Portland Housing Center to get a really true, better idea of where we are. So that was a very long answer to your question, and I hope it did give you a little bit of an answer. So we'll have more to come. This is a topic I'm sure we'll be discussing in almost every meeting with you. So.
No, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the extent to which the Bureau has been sort of self-evaluative and self-critical in thinking about the program design flaws that have become apparent. I hope that this analysis that's happening now is going to dovetail with the budget timeline that you just presented, which is coming very soon, in thinking about what it will take to consider, swap outs of dollars that would allow this promise to be kept, whether that means requesting one-time general fund, CDBG reallocations, or other shifts. I think it would be very shameful to let it go over an expiration date on a funding source, given all that has happened to date.
I think you spoke my sentiments. Yeah. And appreciate the work and the effort to kind of reposition, to pivot, as it were, to make sure that we're helping families. I think, speaking for the Oversight Committee, our absolute commitment and desires to see as many people helped as can be helped. So thank you for the work and the efforts. We appreciate it and look forward to future information. I really would like to know, as we're moving forward, some projected numbers as we look at what we've been able to do to this point. The whole reason for the pivot was to, expedite that process, especially in light of the timeline. So I'll be looking forward to that information. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Next, project updates, Carl Dinkelspiel and Matthew Schabold. Yeah, sure. I'll miss you, though.
We're going to sing for you. Well, I will, but Matt probably won't. Let's see, where are we here? Okay, so we're going to sort of intersperse our conversation here. Matt's going to tell you something about the preference policy relative to rental units, and I'll talk more specifically about the 6 projects that are rental projects. So I'll turn it over to my duet partner.
Sounds good. One of these isn't working well. So just to give an overview, this is just an overall general update on the rental housing program goals. And so a piece of that is the preference policy and a piece is development, as Carl mentioned. So I'm not going to go through each of the pieces of the timeline individually, but essentially in October of 2017 is when we opened up the application window for Garlington Place, which was a Cascadia Behavioral Health voluntarily piloted the preference policy. We had been working with them since, I want to say, early to mid 2017. In January, we verified the names that came through that application round and sent them to Cascadia Behavioral Health. In February, we started the process for the Beatrice Morrow and Charlotte B. Rutherford after months of planning. We started planning for those probably around September of 2017. We verified those names in April of 2018 and pushed them forward to Central City and PCRI. And then in April of 2018, Garlington Place welcomed 52 new residents into their new apartment units. So, yeah. So a quick overview for the Garlington, because we haven't had a chance with all of the focus on home ownership in recent meetings, the applicants that came through. We had a total of 488 applicants that cleared the full application process. You can see there the breakdown by either the eminent domain status, which put people right at the top of the list, or the 0 through 6 points, as well as the breakdown by race ethnicity to the right. So where we are today is we've sent over 146 applicants. They've approved 34 applicants, and some of those folks, a majority of those folks have units. Some are waiting for a particular unit or a particular AMI level, and then there are 36 pending applicants right now that they're reviewing to get on their wait list for when there are vacancies and whatnot. Okay, current rental projects.
So like I said, we'll sort of interweave our comments here. So the Garlington was not financially supported by PHP. Obviously, they participated in the preference policy program. These 6 projects are all financially supported by PHP. I think you've seen them all before, so I'm going to give you some specific slides on these as we go along. But the 6 are Beatrice Morrow, Charlotte B. Rutherford, Magnolia 2, King Parks, the North Williams Center, and Argyle, which Shannon mentioned already. You can hopefully see those on your map there. The highlight is that there's a total of 501 units here. And I wanted to add some detail to this slide that's maybe interesting to folks. Approximately half of the units of those 501 are what we term family size units, so the 2 or 3 bedroom units. And then there's roughly 10% of the units are at 30% AMI for people that are 0 to 30% AMI, and another 10% over and above that are for people earning 50% AMI. So the rest of the units are at 60% AMI. So the other thing I want to mention, I think Dr. Bates had asked a question a couple meetings ago about leverage. PHB has roughly $40 million in these projects, and you may recall that the North-Northeast strategy had just $8 million for development, so the Bureau's added significant dollars in order to develop these projects. And this leverage is roughly another $100 million, so the leverage ratio of roughly 2.5 to 1, 3 to 1. And then you can see the construction timelines, which I talked about with the ownership projects. We expect Beatrice Morrow to open shortly, as well as Charlotte Rutherford, and you'll see pictures of them, real live pictures of them out on the street. The other 4 projects are still in pre-development, but would be starting construction, as you can see, in the next 3 to 6 months. And so, yeah, there are the real life pictures. So Charlotte Rutherford is, as I said, almost finished, 51 units, a mix of 1 and 2 bedrooms. Central City Concern is the project sponsor here. A relatively inexpensive project at $10 million, and you can see the mix of units. The project is at roughly at Deacom, more or less, on Interstate Avenue. And then the other project that's almost ready to open, the Beatrice Morrow on MLK at just south of Fremont. Again, you can see the unit mix. This is a PCRI project, 80 units altogether, with a mix of studios, 1, 2s, and 3s. Total cost of $27 million, and this project has 20 project-based vouchers. And then I will stop there because Matt's going to tell you about the preference policy.
So for the Charlotte B. Rutherford and the Beatrice Morrow, we ran a dual application window. So as I said, we started our planning in the fall of 20...
One second. For those who are having conversation in the back, if you would please be mindful of your voice, this room carries. So thank you very much.
Yes, so we ran a dual application process given that the buildings were anticipated to be complete and open at the same time. In total, the application pool was 1,665 applicants. You can see there that there were 17 applicants that qualified for eminent domain status, and then a fairly even spread of around 200 applicants per point cohort. For those that don't recall the original structure of the preference policy, we really, when we're looking at the 4 through 6 point and eminent domain households, those are the folks that really have the generational impact of displacement, because it means that they themselves have lived in North and Northeast Portland, and their parent, grandparent, or guardian have lived there. And so when we're analyzing our application returns, we're really looking across the spread, but with a particular focus on 4.5, 5.6 point and eminent domain applicants. So looking at the race ethnicity data broken out, you can see there that the majority of applications were black or black with another race, but a strong sampling of applicants across all races and ethnicities. We sent a total of 267 applicants, the top 267 on the list, to both the Beatrice Morrow and the Charlotte B. Rutherford. This is the breakdown here by race ethnicity as well as point cohort. Again, the majority of the folks on the list were black or multiracial that were sent over to those 2 buildings. And as they have been going through the process for the Charlotte B. Rutherford, there are 34 applicants that have been approved, and then 36 applicants that are pending, with 51 available units in the project. And then with the Beatrice Morrow, we have sent over, like I said, 267 applicants, and we don't have an update on the data similar to the Charlotte B. Rutherford at this time.
So just wanted to go through just some quick stats, if you will, on the remaining 4 rental projects. As I said earlier, all of these would be in construction sometime in the next sort of 3 to 6 months is what we expect. The Magnolia 2 is a project that was proposed by Innovative Housing, Inc. This is one of the 2 projects that the state funded with LIFT funds. The LIFT funds here were roughly $2.3 million and was able to close the funding gap for this project and was able to move ahead. They're moving ahead actually rather quickly. We hope to have this permitted by Thanksgiving time. So that's exciting. King Parks is a project that, again, is by PCRI. They're still in the pre-development stages, but they're hoping to have this the pre-development wrapped up by the end of calendar 2018. 70 units here at the corner of Martin Luther King Boulevard and Rosa Parks Way. That's the not especially creative name so far. I'm sure there'll be a better one than that. The North Williams project is the second project that was awarded LIFT funds. This was again in the, I think it was $2.7 million. I'll look at my notes if you want the exact number. From LIFT, the project is on Williams. The property is currently owned by the county, Multnomah County. And again, they're well on their way. I think somebody here from Bridge Housing is the developer, if you have specific questions about the project. This is interesting. There was 40 vouchers that came with this particular application. So those we expect to have very low-income households at the project. You can see those 40 0 to 30 units reflect those 40 vouchers. And then lastly, as Shannon already mentioned, the Argyle project, which will be developed by REACH. Slightly farther out in time horizon, but would expect to get construction sometime in early mid-2019. Obviously, large project, 190-ish units in Kenton. And as Shannon mentioned, appreciate your support for additional funding, which essentially close the funding gap for that project. That's what I got.
Questions from the Oversight?
Yeah. So Shannon, so I included just rental projects in this update. For next time, I'll bring the multifamily ownership projects, as I mentioned in response to Dr. Bates. There are 3 multifamily ownership projects in development. 5020 North Interstate is a project by Proud Ground. Also exciting that they also received a LIFT award to close their funding gap of roughly $1.6 million, I think, off the top of my head. So that was a very recent announcement. We're really excited about being able to move ahead with that project as a result, again, of the state partnership with the state. And so that project is just beginning kind of the serious pre-development work. We wouldn't expect construction until late 2019. And then the 2 habitat projects, as I mentioned, one on Olin and one on Kilpatrick, sort of 2 projects on Kilpatrick, are far along in the permitting process and would expect construction either late 2018 or early 2019.
Shannon, you got a comment?
I was just trying to remind Carl to talk about the homeownership project with 5020, which at this point means that we've identified all of the funding gaps that previously been discussed with this committee. At the present moment as they're moving into getting ready for construction, are filled. So all of these projects, as far as we can tell, barring any unusual circumstances, are now moving forward in the development process. So it's, from our opinion, just phenomenal news and a much different position than we were in, but just 4 months ago. So.
Well, I would agree. I think it's fantastic that everything is moving forward. Now, total number of doors that we're talking about, rental and ownership opportunities.
When you say doors, you mean units, yeah? Yeah, so 501 for the rental projects, and there are 51 units at 5020 North Interstate. 40 of those will be affordable, and then 12 units at Olin, and then 30 total at Kilpatrick. So that's, off the top of my head, that's roughly 600 units.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Questions for Carl or Matt? Before I ask mine. Any questions, Tristan? Felicia, any question? Marlon? Okay. Lisa? So as we're getting breakdown of numbers and ethnicity, how soon can we anticipate getting that for all of the projects? Do you have an idea?
Yeah, so the race and ethnicity comes as we are doing the lists for preference policy. So these units, the last 4 projects are not in construction at all. So you would expect, roughly 12 to 14-month construction period. I don't know, the last I asked Matt about when we start pulling those names, but typically the lease-up process starts 3 or 4 or 5 months before the end of construction.
So is the question for the Garlington, Beatrice Monroe, and Charlotte B. Rutherford, or for the future projects?
The ones that are presently, in
Right.
lease up.
So Garlington is still filling a couple of units, and so once they're finished with that, we can get final numbers to you on exactly who the households are by any number of demographic factors. With Beatrice Monroe and Charlotte B. Rutherford, they have been going through the pre-screening and pre-qualifying process. They haven't started to move people in yet, and so it would be after they have actually leased all the units and everyone has moved in, and then our staff gets a closeout of everyone who's moved in from the list, and we have the age, race, gender, and other demographic information. And then Carl's right. We start for the future projects on the preference policy side. We'd like to start the process about 9 months before the partner organization is planning on leasing up, so that we can get them the list of names about 3 to 4 months beforehand. So it takes us anywhere, depending on the time of year, anywhere between 3 and 5 months to run a preference policy application process. And then we want to give the 3 or 4 months to the partner organization so they can screen them and identify the clients that they're going to be moving in.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa. No. Thank you. Appreciate it. At this point, we are set to have some discussion around the joint meeting that was held in July. In July, there was a meeting between the North-Northeast Community Development Initiatives Oversight Committee and our North-Northeast Housing Strategies Oversight Committee to talk about maximum indebtedness and also some amendment to the URA. And what I'd like to do, and I didn't talk to you about this before, but Shannon or whomever might be prepared to kind of contextualize and give us a synopsis, reminding some of the group around that conversation. And you have in your hand frequently asked questions, which are responses to the questions that were asked that night. They were asked that night at the meeting. So you have responses to those questions, and we're going to spend some time just to kind of talk through the context of increasing or the thoughts related to the requests associated with that meeting. So, Shannon, if you want to contextualize some.
Thank you, Dr. Holt. As you may recall, the Housing Bureau and Prosper Portland are proposing for our oversight bodies, the North and Northeast Neighborhood Strategy Oversight Committee, of which I am pleased to join this evening, and the Prosper CDI, their oversight body for the interstate urban renewal area, proposing to increase maximum indebtedness for the district. That essentially means extending the amount of money that comes from property taxes that are already in existence. It doesn't involve an increase in property taxes, but instead of having the property taxes flow back through all of the different jurisdictions, the taxing jurisdictions, which notably would be the City of Portland's general fund, Multnomah County, and the school district. We would continue to capture an additional $67 million in maximum indebtedness. The Housing Bureau broached this conversation with Prosper Portland based on what we felt was significant need to continue with the North and Northeast housing strategy. The Housing Bureau, which receives 70% of the urban renewal tax increment financing, which is the property tax funds, is proposing to complete another additional 4 significant developments in the district, one of which is would potentially be a 3-acre parcel of land located in the University Park Neighborhood Association that is just barely outside the district, that we just agreed with the Water Bureau to purchase. It could result in 50 to 70 homeownership opportunities in small, either single family or more townhouse style homeownership. There is another particular piece of property that we had discussed with you that we're in the process of trying to negotiate with existing landowners for a land banking opportunity, but we'd like the funds to eventually develop that parcel. And then we believe that there would be 2 additional other opportunities potentially in the district. And so I apologize, I would have brought slides to give you a reminder, but that was kind of how we started this conversation. And so we brought in July both of those 2 committees together, the Prosper Committee and this committee, to discuss the concept of increasing maximum indebtedness within the district. There were a significant number of questions, some presentations regarding how tax increment financing works, some information regarding the history of the formation of the urban renewal area, and then what you have before you tonight were, as we have titled, frequently asked questions, but they're actually questions that we heard either from the committee members or from public testimony in asking for additional information. And so in working with Prosper Portland, our project team manager, Victoria James, worked to answer these questions, and that's what you have before you in the packet this evening. I believe we had also previewed not the answers, but the questions with each committee to ensure that we had captured what you had wanted us to respond to. And I hope that gives you some context, Dr. Holt, and I'm sure that you probably have not had a chance to read all of the questions and answers and the responses, but they are provided for you this evening.
Thank you very much for the context. Committee, as you are considering the information, questions and or comments from you? It's our opportunity to discuss. Yeah.
Okay. So we can say more things about this Q&A right now? Like we can ask more questions to get more answers?
Yep.
All right. Yeah, I mean, as a person, I mean, I recognize a number of the questions that I asked here, but I think that the answers are not quite getting to what my concerns are. So, I mean, particularly in asking what could go wrong. And I think it's really incumbent on the city to recognize what has already gone wrong in the way that this URA, not only this URA, but some others in the city as well, have been managed in a way that has deprioritized equity, has deprioritized community development historically. So that actually seems to me to be the primary risk. The primary risk to me is to, you know, continue to be unaccountable to community demands, to be, you know, to do activities of physical redevelopment that continue to push the market further without actually significantly offsetting those effects. And I think that the risks of that And this relates to this question that I've been asking about leverage, and the question that I've been asking about the impact to other jurisdictions has to do with the extremely limited possibilities for using TIF funding. And so when I ask what is the impact to other jurisdictions, this tells me the effect in dollars. It is not the impact of what activities or programming is foregone when these dollars don't come to those jurisdictions that may better align with the goals that we have for community development in this area, because they have more flexibility than TIF dollars. For example, the county doing health-oriented programming or human services-oriented programming that cannot be paid for with TIF money, that's an impact if they were to spend that money in that way. That is not, I don't think, being accounted for here, although, of course, I mean, we're here in the Housing Bureau Committee, we all believe that housing is really critically important, but the pieces that are missing, the things that are not being leveraged around, is community development. Of course, affordable housing development always leverages dollars. It has to, right? No one, that's the name of the business. Everyone's doing a great job on that. But where the money we haven't seen coming in around the kind of programming that was missing from the Albina plan from 1993 that I've been hearing about ever since I came to Portland, which is what happened to the education, what happened to the job training, what happened to a broad sense of health and well-being for people, what happened to community ownership and development, and right, things that are not bricks and sticks. And so those are the questions, that's the big question that I have here, in how are we going to pursue a genuine strategy of community development. It's not possible with this funding tool. So what is the other work to be done? Because these programs, they are just not going to touch everyone. And I have to say, particularly when I look on the Prosper side, this sort of vagueness around what is a cultural business hub or what might be community livability projects, in part because it's not our committee, right? We don't sit and talk about that all the time, but they're physical things, right? It's a community livability physical object. It is not a community livability people development project, because that's not what they can spend the money on. So that's my bigger concern about how this moves forward. How can we get that larger project to happen?
Thank you, Director Bates. You've given a lot to think of, but I guess what I'd like to take from you is get a little bit more clarity on what you're referring to in particular when you say larger project. So what are the specific things you would be looking to achieve? You talked a little bit about some of the promises from the Albina plan in regarding to education, job training, community development. I guess I would, and I'm sorry, I don't think I have a very well thought out answer to your question right now, but I guess I'd be looking for you for a little bit more definition of what you're particularly thinking of in terms of
Sure.
the project.
I mean, I think that we've spoken quite a bit, and Bishop Holt in particular has spoken quite a bit about what does it mean for people to come back and live here in this physical space and have a physical unit, but how is it that they're engaging fully in the community? When I look at the data that Jackie just presented to us from PHC, what will fund the ongoing financial capabilities education program, for example. We've talked about the problem of preserving homeownership, not in the sense of physically fixing someone's, foundation of their house, but the foundation of their financial life and their family life, and the ability to pass on their home through their family because they have other challenges going on. How do we engage young people in anything? I mean, where do we see youth? TIF money at Jeff High was building them a retaining wall. It's not running their mock trial team or their art program or their enrichment of their lives, or helping them to engage in civic participation or politics. It built them a retaining wall. So those are the kinds of things when I think about the broader notion of community development. How do we get the neighborhood associations to engage with as a vehicle of political participation? How do we get them to engage with folks who are coming back here who have been blocked out of that avenue to political power? How do we, I could list many, many things, but they're all stuff that is not fall into sticks and bricks, right? How do I get childcare that's affordable for these families that are moving into these, it's all these units. It's amazing. It's wonderful. But, where's the 2-year-old going to go all day?
I think, Shannon, if I get what Dr. Bates is saying is, if you look at the Lentz Urban Renewal Plan and the Albina Urban Renewal Plan, it had a vision behind it, a vision that was tied to the units. And so how do we hold that piece accountable? So it's really about being able to track, because I know that if you go back and read the Lentz plan, I think people would be a little disappointed when they look at the vision part of it, the civic, because in order to really combat gentrification, which happens with any urban renewal dollars, right? Let's just say it, is how do the people that are going to experience gentrification in a negative way, how is we as the government entity coming in combating that? So I think that's more of what I'm hearing. And so that civic participation can be measured by actually going back to past plans like the Lentz Urban Renewal and the Albina Plan and saying, here's what it was supposed to do, because they're done. Did it do it? And if not, what are the lessons learned that now moving forward, we can take those lessons and try to combat in the future?
So I'm taking the question from Dr. Bates a little deeper. It sounds like there's a juxtaposition of what opportunities will be missed because there's taxing districts and they would receive those funds. So if the maximum indebtedness increases, there's the possibility of that money that would you normally go through to a different district, and how that money is used by Multnomah County for social services, which is what they provide, versus creating additional affordable housing. That's what I'm trying to make sure I'm hearing it correctly, because there are things that TIF can't provide. TIF is sticks and bricks. There's things that the taxing districts would receive and use that money to provide that are not sticks and bricks, but are social determinants for gentrified community to participate in the livelihood. Is that what we're talking about?
And Cupid, I'm not disagreeing with you on that point. It's that part of it is generally written into the plan, but it's the part that isn't held accountable. That's the part that she's really discussing. So I think we're talking about the same thing, but how do we measure that part, which I think is really important. And to give a clearer indication that I can think of, for example, on these units that we're building, how many of those jobs, those living wage jobs, are going back, and there's people of color behind those living wage jobs? And of those living wage jobs, the people behind it, what are the tools that we're providing to get, let's just say, African Americans into the trades, or whatever it is that's needed, that will then take that specific new job, whether it's being an electrician or a plumber, then translates to wealth in that particular family, that translates in them being able to leverage that. So I think there's those pieces. I'm just giving one little section, but behind every unit we build is lots and lots of money, but is that money going back into our communities that we're gentrifying?
Yeah, and I would say, to the question about the taxing jurisdictions, I don't want to ask that in a naive way. I don't imagine that just by virtue of Multnomah County having X million additional dollars, that it will be then funding the Black Women's Healthy Birth Initiative of my dreams. That's a political process. That's a policy process. Right, and the positive thing about the district is that it contains the funding and the spending and the activity within this geography. We know it's going to be here. It's just that it's not a complete package of what is needed here for people in the community to really be connected and thriving and healthy people. So what's the work that we would need to do that, again, I go back to this question of sort of people are looking nationally at this initiative as an innovation around something which in my field, in urban planning and in academia, people say can't be done, right? Because gentrification happens. There's nothing you can do about it. You just have to let those places go. This is a city saying, well, no, actually, we are going to let people come back and we are going to return them, but it's not the full concept of everything that people would need and want. So I want to figure out how do we use that national level of attention and the reputation of Portland as an innovator and all this, blah, 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 to say that we can go to the major philanthropic foundations and get an equivalent dollar amount for all of these community development programming needs that we also have in this area. How do we use that reputation and grant writing capabilities and connections that we have around the nation to bring funds to do that work? We've built a bunch of housing, that's great, but I want to do the whole project.
Yeah, we've talked extensively about what are we bringing people back to, right? So what happens with community, and how are we very intentional around helping to support the efforts of community. When we first started this work, there was, and Dr. Bates, you mentioned this, I think, maybe it was July that you mentioned it, or May. We first started this work, of course, it was a different administration at the time and a different leader of the Portland Housing Bureau, but one of the things that was talked about was leveraging the dollars that get allocated against private foundations and or other investments and other resources. So I don't think that there's a resistance or hesitance or a negative perspective of utilizing TIF, but TIF is one tool. And so how do we fit that in? How do we do two things? One is, how do we broaden, how do we leverage those dollars, but also how do we make sure that we're mitigating further issues, right? So what are we doing that's strategically optimizing all that is being brought to the table? I think some of these things that are here that Prosper is responsible for, and I dare not speak for them, and I see Leisha Posey back there, who's a co-chair of the CDI. Part of the work is to address some of those other opportunities, some of those economic developments, some of the broadening the scope of touching families that don't fit into the normalized programs, but still need help in purchasing homes in North and Northeast Portland. You can be making 100% MFI. It's still hard to secure housing in Portland. And so I think there's some work, but as we look at, we don't want to look at it in silos or in vacuums, right? I know we have to be very concentrated as we address each issue, but nothing is an island in and unto itself. And so how do we take advantage of, what can we do at this moment with the lessons we've already learned? How do we best position ourselves to make sure that we're helping community develop as much as possible? And I don't know the answer to that. There's concern as it relates to maybe the limited view. And I know, again, you can do with the tool what you can do with the tool. So how do we think around that?
So here's the question. This is a genuine question. Again, I'm not trying to be like a pain. Does the capital C City of Portland have in its infrastructure, in its setup right now, in these bureaus, the capacity to even coordinate, plan, and activate the things that we are talking about right now? Because it seems to me that is, PHB is the H. It's housing. It got slimmed into a very specific agency. And I'm actually, as we're saying all this stuff, it's not clear to me even where this could or would live.
So, first of all, I am thinking a lot, even as I'm sitting here, about all that you're raising regarding different pieces and portions. To the capital C city, I think there are different pieces that we should have some discussions about kind of on this list of items. Let me talk about the H, the housing portion. So we don't just do bricks and sticks. You know, we do have other services funding that we do engage with. And, you know, I think maybe that's part of even having a discussion with you about what does our budget look like? What do we do?
We were just talking about TIF as it relates to bricks and
No,
sticks.
yeah, I'm
So,
aware,
yeah.
but I'm also, you know, we do other things, right? So we do rental services funding with some other dollars. Granted, we are not a general fund bureau. We're predominantly funded by urban renewal funds and then some, essentially what is CDBG funding and a little bit of general fund. But
And CDBG means?
Community Development Block Grant funding. It's a federal source of funding that sometimes wanes and waxes, but it's how we do a lot of our work when it comes to fair housing and rental services. So supporting legal assistance for tenants to be able to stay in their housing, or supporting different programs that we might run for other portions of fair housing or rental services. I don't want to go through, I don't want to pretend that there is a magic pot of money sitting there to be reprogrammed, though. Let me just be clear. But I think that there are other things that we, and I'm looking at Cupid Alexander, the representative of the mayor's office. I think there are some things that we have this evening that we can have some discussions about with other city agencies and other bureaus. And we typically don't work in the education field itself, right? That's usually the school districts, et cetera, but we can help facilitate dialogue. I think it sounds like outside of this TIF URA discussion that this committee wants to have a discussion. I've heard you say this, and I feel like we don't necessarily react to you other than listening to you. But how do we help move some of these agenda items forward that you do want to talk about and do want to make a difference on? And quite frankly, it's not just going to come from government. A lot of these things can not, you know, we can help move them forward, but I think there would be community-led as well. I would love to talk more about, you know, I have heard about this original vision of leverage. Though I worked with the Bureau then, I will be frank with you, I was not as in tune to the concept that you're raising about philanthropic interest. But I think we would be very interested in trying to work jointly with this committee on philanthropic opportunities. But I, you know, not to say we would ask you necessarily to do the work, but we definitely love your input on where those opportunities are. I think you're all have ideas about places we could look for grants, and I think we'd like to do that in cooperation with you. So I'm sure it's not the exhaustive answer you'd like, Dr. Bates, but I think we should have a more formal dialogue about this topic, if you're willing to as a committee, and I'm happy to try to facilitate what I can with the big C city on behalf of the Housing Bureau and the committee.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Cupid, I'd like to hear from you regarding what you're hearing as we're having this conversation. And I know there's timing and, you know, there are a host of things that are at play here. And as we're talking about maximum indebtedness, I don't know that there's resistance, but it needs to fit into some other pieces.
Yeah, no. I think I'm understanding. And we're unpacking a lot, and I know that there's a lot of deliverables that come from different entities. There are examples of it being done. An example of that is the joint office, of how they're leveraging the services of Multnomah County with the housing provided through the Portland Housing Bureau. I think that the conversation needs to be had about how you holistically add all the services that are needed and who needs to have contracts with whether that's an intergovernmental agreement, where the funding is going to come from to support a community. I would hesitate to say that it can't be done. I think that there has to be called that question to what the deliverables should be. Of course, we can always talk to the mayor and take a look at what the city of Portland is offering through each one of its bureaus. And then there would have to, you know, be a talk with other jurisdictional entities that provide something different that the city of Portland does not provide, that we have agreements with, and seeing how we can use that to support and leverage those assets for the benefit of the community with what funds are available. So that's what I'm hearing. Like I said before, we do have examples of different cross-jurisdictional actions and plans and forward-looking processes that we engage with, and it seems like it would be reasonable to have that same sort of process to discuss and answer some of those questions.
Appreciate that. Go ahead.
So to build off a little bit of what both Shannon and Cupid said, I think taking a step back from the housing side of things, which is, we work for the housing institution. That's what our focus is. I think maybe a good, at least first step or first steps for us is we can work with the mayor's office and we can, review the Albina community plan. We can come back and just have an honest conversation and again, take a step back from the housing piece and say, okay, here's our initial assessment of the pieces that have not been funded or have not been implemented or the pieces that are missing, recognizing there's some that will have a limited ability to influence, at least directly, and then come back with some recommendations or some joint recommendations with the mayor's office to say, here are the bureaus we're going to engage with and talk about the funds that they're spending in North and Northeast Portland and whether or not those align with the Albina Community Plan, and hopefully convince some other commissioners in charge and bureaus to participate, other jurisdictions, as well as some potential national foundation partners as a way to try and start to bring the actors that would support this financially together.
Matt, I think you brought up a good point, but I think we need to recognize in this space, especially with this crowd, that there have been overlapping plans that we are aware failed. And I think it calls to question why they failed and how they're not going to continue. And I think that that's the deep dive that we need to take a step back and look at, because some of these plans just weren't delivered on.
So I would just in the hope of not sort of like duplicating things that have already been done, I know that Prosper, I think I see Kim Moreland back there, has done some work to sort of green light, red light, things that were said that didn't happen from the ICURA plan. The Paul Peoples plan also did some work in that process to look at the Albina plan, to talk about unanswered promises, and I would absolutely, encourage engaging with Joy Elise at Paul to have an updated sense of what possible priorities would be, as well as other folks who have been working on, thinking about those questions and asking those questions. Again, in the spirit of budget season coming very, very quickly, even though we've just started a new fiscal year, maybe a one-time ask is to put together, some personnel. I don't know where they would be housed, but sounds like a staff position that could last for a year or two, or a small team that would work on putting this together. Right. It's a little bit of different work, but someone who could work in this interagency kind of way.
Yeah, I think that sounds reasonable. And
you can ask some deep pockets to pay for it, maybe. To ask some deep pockets to pay for it. We have a local philanthropic community. We have a national philanthropic community that's looking at this. Again, I keep beating that horse, but it's just very strange to me. There's so much entrepreneurship happening here around leveraging dollars and doing development and doing new ideas. That is just an obvious place to be going to in this world. And I know there's other bureaus that do that work very actively to bring in more grants.
So I know as a part of another table, we're trying to gather all of the documents that have been affected in North and Northeast Portland, overlapping plans and the non-deliverables that happened. When the Powell People's Plan came out, they did deliver it to the mayor's office. Of course, I read it. I think it'll be great to look at some of the other deliverables from the Urban League, and I think even SEI's reports from the past to now, even over the last 5 to 10 years. Would be important in order to give context to the conversation. So I will take that consideration to the mayor, and I'll work with Shannon and Matthew on some ideas, and hopefully we'll be able to present something sometime soon.
Appreciate that. Felicia, I'm surprised you haven't weighed in. Usually there is a passionate statement. I've been waiting for you to pull it out. This passionate statement around Black people have been wounded, injured, hurt in this city over and over again, intentionally, strategically. We know it. And so by no means is it a matter of this being a battering ram. That's not the approach. But what we're saying is that we have to be as holistic and strategic and intentional to help those who've been most impacted by city actions, right? And housing is great, but that's only part of it. That isn't all. And so what are we doing around economic opportunity, workforce development, capacity building, et cetera, and how are we making sure that the groups that are working are not getting siloed and put into where we're kind of, everybody's in their track, but things aren't overlapping. So how do we do that and do that better?
Well, my thing is, when I'm thinking about the actual question, because I've been spending a lot of time recently at the city, is how do you make these systematic changes? This is purely a bureaucratic question when we shuffle bureaus every single year with new commissioners, new staff, part of it is these people around the table that work at the city, I think that's hard. Because I was thinking about it the other day, because I'm working on something in another bureau, and they're like, crap, we got a new director, we got to do a whole bunch of training. I do think that right there, if we could just get if we could get commissioners to be with the bureau for a little while instead of shuffled all the time constantly. I know that sounds really silly, but it makes a huge impact when you go down the base level.
This is an absurd system of government.
Yeah. So
we agree. We all agree.
I was saying it I'm looking right
But
in the camera.
Portlanders keep approving it.
This is absurd.
It went to the ballot.
So, but is there a way in the interim, before we get someone opens the city charter and gives us a system that is rational, because there is no other city in this country over 150,000 people who have a commission form of government, because everyone else has recognized it as unaccountable and inefficient. What is the work that we need to do to engage commissioners outside of the person who happens to be assigned to this bureau at this moment, or for this fiscal year, or for this budget season, to ensure that there is a political will across 5 people, such that, and an awareness across 5 people, maybe not to the operational detail, but so that there is a sense of responsibility and investment and a desire to keep moving it forward, regardless of where some people's bosses shuffle it to in the next iteration.
That's the $1 million question. That's the $100 million question, right? Because the system of governance was brought to the voters of Portland and they approved it again. I think that the conversation we can have with the mayor is, when they are shuffling, how that's going to work out. Shannon's worked in the building for a long time, and part of it is a part of the political process just in general. I always encourage every single group to talk to all of the commissioners. You need 3 out of 5, sometimes 4 out of 5, sometimes 4 out of 4. Understanding emergency, understanding how the process works, understanding how budgeting works are all a part of community. From my purview, community development and community empowerment, because if you can't follow the dollars and understand when you need to file an ordinance or what an ordinance is, then it's very, very, very difficult to follow how all of this works to get a building in one place. Even if you want it, even if it's approved by 2 people and 3 people disapprove of it, it's going to be hard to have that. So I think that, I'm not saying I have an answer to that, because I don't know the answer.
Well, as I may have mentioned, because I am on leave right now from Portland State University.
We've been lining you up for some stuff.
If you would like to schedule some meetings for members of this committee with commissioners, with the mayor, to talk about the work and their commitment to it and how they can help to carry it through and follow through on it, and use their connections and their networks and their thinking about how to bring more resources to this, you just send me a little Google Calendar invite and I will be there.
I heard that's a challenge. I'm about to send her all sorts of Google invites on the calendar. I'm there all day, every day. But I would encourage this group to talk to the other commissioners and set it up with their staff. And I know that many of you go to the city, and I would also encourage the community to do such also.
Thank you very much.
Bishop Paul, I do have one recommendation related to our committee that I think would be a real win. at least for me to hold us accountable, is I would like to know the story behind the units that are about to be produced and put on the street. And what I mean by that is if we really are practicing what we preached, how many people of color help build these units? What does the demographic look like that's going into these units? You know, what kind of families? I think that who built it, how much money actually went into our communities, so asking the CDCs and PHP, and coming back with just the story behind each unit, I think would be an interesting story and would hold us also accountable to the community, because I think it's not just the beautiful building, but how was that beautiful building built? Did we really have, for example, minority contractors on Argyle? You know, what kind of families are we having going into the buildings? Are they going to get services? I think that that's a story, because in our world of community development, it's not just building the units, right? It's really about the residents. And so a lot of our report out to Northeast Oversight Committee is always about the units, but not what's behind the units. So I thought that might be another sort of reporting tool that really, one, will give us a different picture and a perspective as well, since now we actually physically have units and people moving into the units, and we know who built them and which contractors and all of that.
I love it. I think that's fantastic.
We'll be happy to do that with you, with the information that we have from each of the projects and where they are in the phase plan, and who they, and if they're not yet in the development process, who's their construction team and what their plans are. I think we have, and again, I have not been here the whole time, but I think we have shared some of this information, but I think it would be good to do a full and complete report as we know it. And this is not really your committee's issue, but you know, as I look at these units, I continue to think of the people in them, and we count units, but we're not actually counting families or people. And we've started to try to express the numbers and then put people behind them. But even as we're looking at buildings yet to be built, I want to make sure that we're thinking about how many people are going to live in them. Because
Absolutely.
It's not 189, it's 650 or whatever the number may be.
Right.
So I'd love to start translating that with you, and then I'm seeing clear head nods from Carl, whether it's us presenting or asking the teams to come in and let you know what their plans are and how they're going to deal with workforce issues and apprenticeships and things like that. We'll be happy to start moving.
And it paints a story, because now families are moving back in, right? That's going to impact our schools. That's going to impact our stores. That's going to impact our lines. So it's just, you're right, it's not 189 units. It's really how it's going to change a neighborhood. So what is that change going to look like? I think it goes back, we can't do it overall for the TIF funds, but let's at least try to start telling the stories behind what this Northeast preference policy money is going towards, so that we can kind of see it and visually actually put it down for the community to see.
Excellent. Tristan, any comment from you?
My thoughts on reading the frequent asked questions from the joint meeting may still stem around a little less sophistication and understanding of everything that I'm reading, but a lot of my questions were touched on, but are still around the first question of Dr. Bates, was just what could go wrong, and understanding, like, the first thing I wrote out was like, what is the real fallout of making the decision, or of increasing the number. In my mind, I feel like an answer to that question 4, really could be 4 or 5 pages long. Like the full risk analysis of how this is affecting not just what we're doing here as a committee, but the city as a whole. And I know we talked about not just being siloed and not just being in, tunnel vision and being holistic, but is this, as Cuba said, is taking action here, is this affecting education at a different point? Is it affecting opportunities elsewhere? So that's really where my thoughts are currently. I just maybe like I said, maybe I'm a little less sophisticated as to what all this is, but I just feel like there's more of a fallout here, and there's more to be answered than the 3 paragraphs that are in the document.
I don't have any questions at this time, but I will just say this is a lot of information. I'm going to need some time to, definitely review it and consider the answers that were given to many of the questions asked, and then go from there. And, next time we meet, definitely bring forth my concerns because it's a lot to soak in a short amount of time, trying to answer all these questions and come up with any additional questions or any things that we might be missing.
Oh, yes, of course. I think that even the staff that worked on this probably hasn't digested fully all the answers that we even put on paper. So if there are things working with the committee that you read and want more information about, either through Dr. Holt or through us, we'd be happy to either bring back a presentation or provide answers as would be appropriate for you, whether that's individually or come back and do a presentation and a deeper dive into some of the questions that you still may have regarding all this information.
Thank you very much. So as you can see, there's much to talk about as it relates to this issue of maximum indebtedness and the URA discussion. So thank you. Thanks, everybody. We're going to move to public comment. And I have two individuals who signed up. We are almost at, 8:58? Is it what? 7:58? 7:48. 7:48. So we're early in our moment. So I've only got two. If there are others who would like to share tonight, again, my request is two things. One is that you sign up, and then secondly, that the comments are as it relates to the conversation that we've had tonight. You are more than encouraged to share, communicate, express, give us feedback even on the meeting, but as it relates to things concerning the work that is going on. So, Linda, you are up first. Linda Tellis Kennedy. So we will give you 5 minutes. The next item.
I might not need that much time.
Time starts now.
All right. Good evening, everyone. So, Oversight Committee, I just want to ask that you would please understand and examine that two of the organizations that have served in this Black community and know this Black community and we're tuned into this Black community, the two for over 25 years or more are no longer participating in the preference policy new process. It kind of got danced around tonight, but that's truly what it is if y'all didn't know. Maybe ask more questions about that as well. In my opinion, and from my side of doing the work to get people mortgage ready, I feel like it's due to the unnecessary dictatorship on process and how to get people mortgage ready. And like I said, these are businesses that's been doing this in the community for over 25 years that have a success rate with home ownership. I also feel like this process, how things are going, is unique to Portland, because usually when there's tax dollars that are used from a city to help families to purchase homes that are designed to help the community, those dollars are designated and not dictated, and the process of those funds. And I looked at other cities. There's nothing that's doing something like what's happening here, but there's similar things. And a lot of times, like I said, the money has been issued, it has been designated, it's been said this is where it's gonna go, but it's not handled, you're not telling those people how to do their work. You're just supporting those people who do the work. And like I said, the two Black organizations that's been doing the work in the community are no longer participating.
So, Linda, just hold on one moment. When you say are no longer participating, what do you mean?
In the new process. we still have the participants. We didn't give up ours like, we still have participants we're working with that came through the preference policy. But we didn't agree to go through the process of sending them over to PHB to do the same thing that we already did with them. And so, which is monitor and get the same data that you all had presented to you tonight in different ways. We all do the same work. They're one of our partners. We all do the same work. We just got different styles and different ways that we do it. But if you look at our success rate on people who have purchased, I mean, I have someone from the preference policy closing on the 26th of this month. I've already helped 4 families that came through the preference policy purchase a home this year. So there's data, we know how to do the work. And we don't need that extra step that was implemented so that you all can have the numbers that you wanted to see.
So I've got a few questions in regard to that. First question, so not participating means what exactly?
So by the choices of the participants, if they chose not to go to PHC through that secondary process, we didn't tell them they had to.
Okay.
From what I hear now, it's written that they do, they have to, or they wouldn't be able to participate in the program. And this is, purchasing homes is all about choice. Process is about choice. It's not something that you should be told how to do it. It's hard enough getting into a program that's going to be supporting you anyway. I just want to make sure that I'm tracking with you. So it's the process that's been the issue, but the funding, are the families still using the funding of the preference policy, the dollars of the allocation from the preference policy?
Yes,
Or?
they've purchased on the open market, the families that I've talked about in the URA, the Interstate Urban Renewal area.
Okay.
So they're still going to get the same help they was going to get anyway. We're still there to support them. We're still there helping them to become mortgage ready, still counseling them, still improving credit scores, telling them what things that they need to do to be able to purchase a home.
Okay.
And the results are in the numbers. You can see what you want to see by just looking at how many people have purchased. I've heard you guys ask that question a lot of times. Who's purchasing? What's going on? Why haven't we seen more people in homes? Well, it's been done if you look at PCRI's numbers. And it has been preference policy people.
So how many more preference policy families?
Before the year is out, the goal is to have 4 more because of our homes on North Williams Avenue.
Okay, can we get that information?
Yeah.
Perfect.
It's public, and you can always get our information. And that's been said a lot of times, that our places were going to be done before the end of 2018, and we would have people in them. And our first ones will be completed this year. And we already know who's purchasing those homes. They're ready. They just need to take the home ownership one-on-one class, a couple of them. And then the next ones, they'll be ready too. So the next 6 people will be ready by the target date of our next ones being finished.
Other
So I mean,
questions?
we're getting the results that you want. The data that you asked for doesn't necessarily give you that result number. It gives you what's happening with people, kind of, because they all got their own individual stories of why their numbers look like that.
We understand that. Understand that. And I won't speak for everyone on the committee. I will say this, that our effort is to make sure that what we've promised is what is produced, right? And so from that end, having the data, having the information is absolutely necessary, which is open lines of communication, and that's all we've been trying to do. And so you've heard me say this to all parties. It's about accountability. So if dollars have been allocated, then what's the accountability associated with those dollars from any program, any institution that functions from, and my side of the table, functions from the policy that's been put in place. The dollars are being allocated through the preference policy, so then part of the accountability is helping us know what's going on. And so this is a curious moment that organizations opted out, we're doing the work, but we're not getting the data. And so how we got to this, what do we do to mitigate and rectify that?
You can get the data. We gave the data, actually. April of this year, we gave the data. That's how the decision was made to do it this way, off of the data that was given. But I didn't expect it to go this way. That, okay, now that you've given us the number. I mean, I don't want to say too much here that's not necessary to say, but it felt like, and I'm not speaking just for PCR, I'm speaking for me because I do the work. But it took a day, to get a day and a half to get all these numbers and get this data that was requested. And then I felt like it just got turned over and used against, like, it wasn't used to say, okay, this is where everything is, but it was like, okay, we're not going to use you, we're going to go over here and do it this way now. That's how it felt. And
okay, well, and I appreciate that. That's a discussion we can have further. So what sparked my attention is when you said you weren't participating, but that isn't what's happening. What you are participating, going through the preference policy, following the guidelines of the preference policy, because that isn't optional if you're using preference policy money.
Well,
right?
The process changed midstream. So we said, let's just stay on course here because of these people. It's working, and it's working for these people. And then we didn't force anybody to do anything. So, and that's fair housing law. People have options. You can't steer and say this is what you have to do. So we just continue practicing what we know is right, and not telling people what to do. And if they didn't choose to do it, then we said, okay, we're going to still work with you. We're still working with these people, and we're going to make sure you get in the house with the money that was already allocated to you.
Anybody else have a question?
And that
I've
was
got
why I
several.
used to fuss before. When I would come up, I won't say fuss, it's not recorded, so I don't. But that's why I have gotten up here a couple of times before about the amount of the money, because first that was an issue, but then this process is secondary. The issue was people who are buying the permanent affordability model is getting more down payment assistance than the people who are buying on the open market or buying the homes that PCRI is building. And I still have that issue. I still never got that addressed. I did ask you all to look into that a couple of times, and I haven't heard anything. One time it wasn't enough committee members here. And there wasn't enough committee members here when the recommendation for all of our clients to go through PHB, you said you were going to wait and talk about it at the next one because there wasn't enough presentation. And then the next thing we know, we are going through that process that was recommended with no vote.
Well, I know that any action or decision has to be done through a quorum. So I will check that date for that time, right? So there has to be a quorum, and we're going to hold to that, guaranteed. Okay, so I'm again just wanting to make sure I'm clear. We're still following preference policy guidelines. It's just the process you're talking about. Okay, all right. We'll have further conversation. Thanks, Linda. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry.
And
Any
thank
other
you.
comments, questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Posey, James Posey. Good to see you, sir.
Good evening, everybody. Really, I had not planned on coming to this meeting, but you know, I got a family member that comes to all these things, and she gets telling me about all this stuff, and my juices get to flowing, and I'm actually the chair of the Economic Development Committee for the NAACP. And, you know, I'm sort of befuddled because, you know, I've been to several of these meetings, and I think the last one I went to, and we talked about the basic issue of really where we really need to get. And Dr. Bates has been very consistent. She praises, you know, she phrases these things and all this intellectual stuff, but at the end of the day, what she's really trying to say, we can't get here, we can't get there based upon what we've been doing. That's really what she's trying to say, and there really is a real frustration because we know that housing is just a symptom of a bigger problem. We know that really it's the situation that is occurring in our community. And I listened to Cupid talk about his boss. His boss recognizes that essentially what we have is economic apartheid. Let me just say that again. Economic apartheid is generating these issues that we have in our community. And we know that we're cyclic in this situation because housing will not solve the problem unless we deal with the underlying issues. And what's really frustrating for me is to watch all you intelligent people go from meeting to meeting. Dr. Holt, you're in the Hilltop meeting. You're in the CDI meeting. We've got so many acronyms for all these meetings, and all you black people are up front in these meetings. You're just sitting around and you're musing. I hear all the intellectual prose, but at the end of the day, we're flapping our wings and we're going nowhere, and you all know it. You all know it. I'm thinking there's a number out there that you all are not willing to talk about. And that number is about what will make us whole in this community, what will begin to remedy all the stuff that you like to talk about, Dr. Holt, the pain and frustration and the sorrow that this community has had. And I mean, let's be real clear about it. People are literally robbed this community. All these banks, all these insurance people, all these people who are living up on the hilltop, as it were. They robbed us. And you all need to tell the story. You don't need to be capitulating to the mayor. He's a good guy, I think, but I'm disappointed in his courage to really bring forth what we really need to do to solve this problem. And you all know this. Don't lie to yourself. Don't sit around being a part of the problem. When you all sit here and you intellectualize this thing and you come to these meetings on and on, you're complicit. You're complicit. My daughter's complicit. I'm complicit. All of us are complicit in maintaining the status quo of injustice to our community. And I say this, you know, because my heart goes, I've been around a long time. I've been in this community about 40 years. And Felicia, you're a wonderful person, and you're in this housing niche right here, and you've been doing this for years. I've been watching you, and you know, we can look at Columbia Villa. Over and over again, we keep repeating this failure that we know that's what it's going to wind up being, because we're talking about housing when we really need to be talking about people's economic capacity to live like everybody else in this community. And all these little numbers you all keep throwing out, and 600 housing, 600, well, these are future ghettos, and y'all know it, and you know it. So I said all that to say, please, don't blame it on the form of government. The mayor he ran to be the mayor. He's essentially the leader of this community. Hold him accountable to the vision that he talks about, and make sure that the vision he talks about is represented in the budget and the numbers it needs to change the dynamics in our community to make the stuff work. I watch this stuff. I watch all these nonprofits run around like chickens with their head cut off, begging for these few dollars, dealing with the symptomatic problems of poverty in our community. Stop this nonsense. Stop this craziness. Get in front of the mirror. Let's have a master plan. You have a planning department with the city of Portland, and guess who they plan for? They plan for white people in the power structure. They don't plan for us. Demand that we have a master to look at this thing holistically, bring a number forward that will allow us to back it down to what we need to have happen. Let me just give you an example. The Broadway corridor, which is PDC's baby over there, we're struggling to try to get them to do the right thing on the Broadway corridor. Jobs are going to be created. Somebody out of Denver is coming here to take that money back to Denver. It's not the first time. We had the combined sewer overflow project, which was over $1 billion with a B. You can't find where black people participated in that. You got the Rose Quarter I-5 project, which is $500 million coming online within the next couple of months. Where's those jobs going to go to? How are we going to empower our community? What are we going to do? How are we going to get that money funneled back to try to heal the problem that this community, that the leaders of this community have created over the last several years? That's just a tidbit of that. They're building courthouses. They're building all kinds of things around us. Black people are nowhere on the scene. They are nowhere relative to the dollars that's going to be created and generated in this process. I could go on, but I'm real frustrated. My heart is hurting, to be quite frank, because I've seen this movie before. I don't want to see it again. It's a nightmare, for real. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Now, historically, and I'm just going to speak for me, historically, I probably would not respond, but I'm going to tonight. So the first response I'm going to say is that none of us sitting here are compensated. We are here committed to the work to advance the concerns of a people that look like us. I've said this before. I lived on Williams and Wygant. So, and my family had a business on Killingsworth and Wygant, the rocket station. So, and it's not there anymore. My mother was part of the families that were displaced from Legacy. She was in 3rd grade when the flood hit for Vanport. So I'm not this removed kind of person who's not been directly impacted nor directly concerned with what's going on. And so that statement of complicity was a little edgy for me. We're not complicit. We're working through the systems that presently exist. We are working within the confines of what we have to push an agenda. If this committee did not exist, we would not have the units that are in place. And there are concerns and conversations that are not just happening in this room. They're happening outside this room, and they're happening directly with decision makers and policy setters. That's why we're committed. That's why we're invested. I am just as black as you are, and just as concerned about the issues that are happening in this city. So that was just a little edgy for me in terms of complicity. So I took that personally. We're committed, and I've been committed for 4 years to this work, to do what is necessary and to address the issues of people of color having opportunity to be involved, secure contracts, be on job sites. Are we at the numbers we'd like to be? By no means. But are we farther than we would have been? Absolutely. No doubt about it. There's a movement. I think we're moving progressively, not at the pace I'd like to see us move, but it's going to require the work of people who are willing to commit their time, commit their energy, commit their evenings to do this kind of work. I will end by saying, I appreciate the passion. Not offended by passion. Passion for me means that it matters. You get upset about something because it matters. Well, I'm upset too, because it matters, which is why we've been committed to this work. And we're going to stay committed to this work. And unless and until there's some other form of system or policy or process that we can move things forward, then this is what we've got. This is the bat we've been offered, and I'll say it this way. This is the bat I've been offered, and I'm swinging for the fence. So, thanks everybody for being here tonight. I appreciate your coming. Have a great Thursday evening.